This happened when I was about 14. I had just started babysitting for this family in my neighborhood. They had 2 kids, a boy who was 10 at the time and a girl who at the time was 8. They were great kids to babysit. They got along with each other without fighting and always did what I asked of them without complaining. Before I launch into what happened, I'm going to give you all some background information about this family's house so you can understand why I was so freaked out. The house is situated pretty far back in my neighborhood on this little side street off of the main road that runs through the neighborhood. The house is in a cul-de-sac, so there's not a lot of traffic on this road at all. Usually, the only people that ever come into the cul-de-sac are the mailman and people who lived in the other 3 houses that were in the cul-de-sac. The street itself was not very long at all, so there were only 3 houses on each side of the street that weren't in the cul-de-sac. Essentially, despite being in a large neighborhood, the street that this house was situated on was very quiet, and if you didn't live in the neighborhood, you might not know that the street existed. It was a fall Friday night. I'm pretty sure it was late November, right after Thanksgiving, and I had arrived at the house around 6 p.m. The kids were already sitting down eating dinner when I got there, and the parents told me that they expected to be home around midnight or so. The parents also made a joke about how the kids had the whole street to themselves, since the other families that lived there were out of town for Thanksgiving. The parents left, the kids finished eating, and we went outside to play in the cul-de-sac. I remember locking the front door and taking the house key outside with me. The kids rode around on their scooters for about an hour. For some reason, I just felt really on edge while the kids were playing outside. I chalked this feeling up to knowing that we were alone on the street since everyone else was out of town. After the kids finished playing outside, we went inside to play Wii in the basement. I remember locking the front door once we were back inside and putting the key on the kitchen counter. I then checked the front door before I went downstairs to the basement. I was super vigilant about checking the doors because I had watched so many scary movies where the babysitter forgets to lock the door and then some crazy murderer gets into the house, blah blah blah. As the kids are playing in the basement, I get that unsettling feeling again. I didn't feel like we were being watched. It was more like when you know that something is going to pop out in a scary movie and you're just anticipating it on the edge of your seat, with tension at its highest. The feeling sticks with me the entire time that we're in the basement, but again, I chalk it up to the knowing that the entire street is empty. The clock strikes 10 and it's time for the kids to head to bed. We go to the top floor of the house where the kids' bedrooms are. The house is set up so that when you open the front door of the house and come inside, you're standing in the foyer with the steps to go to the top floor directly in front of you. If you're standing in the foyer, you can see all the way up the stairs into the bathroom and on the top floor. So the kids are in the bathroom brushing their teeth, and we all hear a car pull into their driveway. I figured that it's their parents coming home super early, and I expect to hear the garage door start opening, but that sound never comes. I walk into the girl's bedroom and look out her front window. There's a car running in the driveway, and there's a man in the car, but the headlights are turned off despite it being 10 p.m. and it's pitch black dark outside. I figured it was someone who just got lost in our neighborhood and was just using the driveway to stop and get their bearings before heading back out on the road. I leave the girl's bedroom and head back to the bathroom where the kids are. Suddenly, I hear a knock on the front door. I turn around and there's a man standing at their door holding a pizza box. There are 2 long windows on either side of their front door, so I have a clear view of this guy, and I know that he has a clear view of us. I immediately get that eerie feeling that I had been feeling all night. I asked both of the kids if they ordered a pizza for some reason, and they both said no. These kids were always very honest and wouldn't lie about something like that, or even order a pizza without asking me, so I knew they were being truthful. Normally I would have gone downstairs to see what this guy wanted. Maybe he had the wrong house and I could point him in the right direction, but that little voice in my head was screaming, "Don't go downstairs. Do not open that door." The guy also looked like he didn't work for any pizza company. Normally they would be wearing a uniform or a hat with the company's logo on it, or something. This guy just seemed off. He looked like he was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, and looked super disheveled. His shirt was really wrinkled. His pants were filthy and ripped, and he had this ratty black baseball cap that was pulled down super far so that his eyes were covered. He was also grinning really aggressively, like I thought this guy's teeth would just shatter because of how hard he was pressing them together. At this point, the kids notice him and start asking why he's here. Should we open the door, etc., etc. I tell them no, and ask that they just go to their rooms and lie down. The boy goes to his room, and I walk the girl into her room and look out the window at the car again. I notice that the car doesn't have one of those pizza delivery car signs on the top, which all of the pizza companies in my town require delivery drivers to have. So now I feel really confident in my initial intuition that this guy isn't a legit pizza delivery guy. The girl gets in bed, and I come back out of her room and sit down at the top of the stairs so that I can keep an eye on this guy. I tried to stay really calm so as not to upset the kids, even though I was flipping out on the inside. He's still standing at the door holding the pizza box in one hand, and he's still grinning that teeth-shattering grin. His mouth was almost too big for his face, I thought. Even though I can't see his eyes because of the hat, I know that he's dead-ass staring at me. Then, without breaking eye contact, he starts jiggling the door handle pretty aggressively while still grinning. I silently thank God that I was so psychotic about making sure the front door was locked. He stops jiggling the handle and resumes staring at me. If I was in this situation now, I probably would have called the police immediately, but being only 14 and fairly new to babysitting, I was paralyzed with fear. I felt like if I took my eyes off of him for a second, when I looked back, he would be standing at the base of the stairs. After about another 5 minutes of the stare down, he literally starts walking backwards off of the porch without breaking eye contact. Legit, this dude is walking backwards towards his car while still staring at me. I go into the parents' bedroom, which also has a view of the driveway, kneel down in front of the window and peek out. I'm expecting to see this guy getting into his car. Nope. The guy is nowhere in sight, but the car is still there. So I return to my perch at the top of the stairs, half expecting to see him at the door again, or worse, standing at the bottom of the stairs. But he was nowhere to be seen. After about 20 minutes, I hear a car starting. I run back to the parents' room, kneel in front of the window again, and notice that the car in the driveway has started, and the guy is sitting in the driver's seat, still fucking grinning. He also doesn't turn the headlights on. He shifts into reverse and begins slowly backing out of the driveway, grinning the entire time. Right before he drives off, he turns his head, and I swear to God, makes direct eye contact with me again. And again, I can't see his eyes because of the hat, but I know that he was looking directly at me. This is really disturbing to me since he didn't really know where I was in the house. The parents' bedroom is in the farthest window to the right if you're looking at the house from outside. The lights in the parents' bedroom are off, and I'm kneeling down. So really, the only part of me that might potentially be visible is the top of my head, my eyes, and my nose. But it's also pitch black outside. He doesn't have his headlights on, and it's pitch black in the parents' bedroom, so I doubt that I was really visible. He also didn't spend time scanning the windows. His head literally just snapped to where I was. It was like he could sense that I was looking at him. After I had time to calm down and collect myself, I started replaying what had just happened and came to the following conclusions. This guy was not a pizza delivery guy. He had no uniform, looked and acted like he was possessed or something, and his car was unmarked. Those 20 minutes or so that elapsed between when he walked backwards off of the porch to when he got into the car were probably spent walking around the house and checking all of the doors, trying to gain entry. He had malicious intent. Maybe he wanted to rob the house. Maybe he wanted to do something more sinister to me or the kids. Either way, this guy was bad news, and I'm glad I trusted the voice in my head. I think he probably found some pizza box and tried to pose as a pizza delivery guy to get me to open the door for him so that he could strike. There are still some parts of the story that are confusing me. If he really wanted to get inside the house, why didn't he find a rock, a brick, or something else to throw through the window? I mean, I'm very glad that he didn't, but I just thought it was a bit odd that he checked the doorknobs and then gave up after he discovered that they were all locked. Maybe he felt like doing something that made a lot of noise that would alert me, and so he could try to sneak in a more subtle way to catch me off guard. Why did he walk backwards up the porch? Was it just to preserve eye contact and thus intimidate me? Or was this dude just insane? Why did I feel so unsettled early on in the evening before this guy even showed up? Was he watching the house and waiting for the kids to go to bed and for me to be off guard before trying to get into the house? How did he know where to look when he was backing out of the driveway? Why was he grinning the entire time? Did he know that our house was the only house on the street that was inhabited at that time? Why did he pick that house, especially given the fact that it's on a very quiet and secluded street and you have to drive pretty far to the back of the neighborhood to even reach the street? He could have picked the 50 or other so houses that you have to pass to even get to that house. The town where I live is upper middle class and has a super low crime rate, and drugs aren't really an issue. We're also surrounded by other similar upper middle class areas, so I'm doubtful that this person was on drugs or some crazy vagrant. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe this dude was just jacked up on drugs. Maybe he was just a vagrant dude. Maybe he really was just a lost pizza delivery man with some unsettling personal quirks. But I'm really doubtful. I attend a college that is located in one of the poorest cities in Northern California. The campus is relatively safe since the school employs its own Department of Public Safety, but after the sun sets, it's usually a good call to remain indoors because that's when the townies come out and they tend to wander into campus. About 2 years ago, I was living in an apartment complex in the main part of campus and I still didn't have a car yet. It was the end of the fall semester and I was the last person in my apartment of 3 girls to finish taking finals, so I was home alone since my roommates had already gone home for winter break. I got back from taking my last exam and followed my usual routine of dejectedly collapsing into bed to cry and sleep off the effects of pulling an all-nighter. When I finally woke up, it was already past 10 p.m. and I was starving. Unfortunately, the student grocery store and cafeteria were closed for the day, and I had nothing in the apartment to eat and no car to get food elsewhere. I was woefully poking around the fridge in the hopes that I would find something substantial to tide me over until morning, when I noticed a Domino's coupon that someone had stuck to the freezer. My stomach's pathetic cries for sustenance had been answered. I quickly decided that there was no shame in ordering a whole pizza, plus Cinesticks for myself because 1, I was ravenous, and 2, the completion of finals demanded some sort of celebration, and 3, if anyone happened to ask, I was going to lie and say I was sharing it with a friend or something along those lines. Anyway, I eagerly ordered and provided the cashier with my address, apartment, and cell number. I typically never give out my number to anyone, but I had ordered delivery from Domino's in the past, and I knew that they needed my number to call me once more when they were outside because the drivers always got lost navigating through campus. About 20 minutes later, I got the call. My food was here. For reference, it's now close to midnight and the campus was pretty much dead since most students had gone home. The driver told me that he had parked in front of a dorm building that was right across the street from my apartment. I hustled out of my apartment and was going down the stairs when I spotted the delivery guy waiting outside of his car with my pizza. At this point, my sense of caution kicked in and I slowed my pace as my brain took in the fact that there were no other students out, the lighting was bad, and I was essentially walking up to a stranger in his car that still had his engine running. As I neared the bottom of the steps, I silently hoped that he would cross the street and approach me so that I wouldn't have to get near the car. Of course, that didn't happen. I made my way across the street and was finally able to get a good look at him. He was a relatively short Hispanic guy, maybe 5'7" to 5'9", in his early 20s, and my nerves were getting bombarded by the creeper vibes he was giving off. I can only compare it to the vibe that you get when you're out clubbing and you suddenly spot the guy lurking in the crowd sporting the slicked back ponytail, sunglasses, oversized shirt, and sagged pants combo who just so happens to be headed in your direction. I did my best to appear calm and keep the mood light and friendly. He made some comments about how late it was and how no one was around, but I just signed the receipt as quickly as possible, gave him my thanks and an awkward smile, and hightailed it out of there as soon as he handed me my food. I could feel him watching me as I climbed the stairs back to my place. Once I got back into my apartment, I locked and chained up the door and sat down on the living room couch to calm myself. After a few moments, I shrugged off the situation and reasoned that it was just my paranoia and overactive imagination acting up again. I had just turned on the television and was about to take my first bite of pizza when I got a text from an unknown number. It read, "You're hella sexy." I connected the dots and matched the text number to the call I had received earlier from the pizza delivery guy. My initial reaction, of course, was shock, since nothing like this has ever happened to me before, but that eventually melted away into laughter and disbelief when I considered my appearance at the time. Like I had mentioned earlier, I had just woken up from my nap after taking my last final. I was wearing a pair of raggedy sweatpants and loose sweatshirt, and my hair was nappy and tied into a messy ponytail. My face was probably greasier than the pizza I was eating, and to top it off, I had my glasses on. Definitely not a pretty picture, much less anything that could even come close to resembling hella sexy. The next morning I got a call from my boyfriend John, and I casually told him about the pizza delivery driver, who casually signed his name in the text as Phildo, and the events that had transpired the previous evening. After sheepishly trying to defend my actions on the basis of poor judgment caused by extreme hunger and promising never to do that type of thing again, John convinced me that I should report it to the campus police as a precautionary measure. I gave them a call, and an officer stopped by my apartment a few hours later. I relayed my story, he took some pictures of the text message, and he wrote down Phildo's phone number. The officer then told me that he would contact the Domino's if I wanted him to, but that it would most likely result in Phildo's termination. I was still relatively unfazed by the whole situation, and I told the officer I just wanted to make sure that this creep never did this to any other girls on campus, but at the same time I didn't want him to lose his job. The officer then started asking me questions about how I felt after my encounter, questions along the lines of, do you feel threatened by Phildo? Do you feel safe in your apartment with the knowledge that Phildo has both your phone number and your exact address? If I wasn't scared before, I definitely was now, and during the course of my questioning, I had broken out in a cold sweat, and my traitorous imagination began conjuring up all sorts of dastardly situations that ended in my untimely demise. Obviously, I ended up giving the officer the go-ahead to pursue my case and contact the Domino's. About a month later, while I was at home celebrating the holidays, I got a call from my boyfriend. I had left him the keys to my apartment so that he could store his bike there and crash in my room while I was away. He told me that he had stopped by my place, but that he couldn't get in because the keys weren't working. He also said that it looked like someone had broken in because there was some glass on the floor and a wooden board across my living room window. I was pretty upset because this was my first time hearing about it, so I called the school the next day to figure out what the hell had happened. Housing transferred my call to the public safety department, and the officer I spoke with was only able to tell me that, according to their records, a maintenance worker had called them 2 days after I had headed home to report my broken window. Public safety had responded by boarding up the window and changing the lock when they noticed it had been tampered with. I convinced the officer to let my boyfriend into the apartment so he could go check and see if anything was stolen, and thankfully, nothing was. My gut tells me that it was Phildo who did it. It was Phildo who tried to pick my lock and then broke my window. It scares me even more now when I consider the fact that nothing had been stolen. My flat-screen TV was right by the window that had been broken, and my boyfriend's fancy road bike was sitting right there in the living room. Why didn't he steal anything? Does that mean his intentions were to break in and get his revenge on me, the girl that had cost him his job? Would this still have happened if I had not given the officer permission to pursue the case? I try not to spend too much time speculating about what Phildo's true intentions were, but when I do, it still makes my heart race when I think about what could have happened if I'd still been in my apartment at the time. I'm a 22-year-old female that weighs 80 pounds and that's athletic. I'm quite tall and have a defect in my eyes, so one's gray and one's green. I promise that'll be relevant later. So this happened when I was 20 and it stopped when I was 21. Many things have happened to me for some reason. I guess I'm just a magnet for weirdness. I met this guy in university when he was finishing and I was just starting. He was assigned my study partner. I'm studying to be a pediatrician. I remember that he was quite nice in the beginning, but started to get jealous whenever I spent time with my boyfriend. This was the first red flag, that whenever I went, I always kind of saw him walking some meters behind me. And then the notes started. There were really sexual notes about me and other things I'm not so sure I should share. After that, I didn't know who it was, but at the end, it was about 255 notes, all in 1 month. The last one actually had names, so I went straight to the office and reported him. I ended up with a different partner. The day that I had to tell them that I had gotten a different partner, I was kind of about to lose it and sweating bullets. The face he made was of pure anger. He started to yell racial slurs at me. I'm a quarter Latin and German. About how I was a Nazi, that I was a psycho, and he went on and on. And now a tip for people like me, just walk away. And that's what I did. The only thing I cared about at that time was that he would not find where my apartment was, or he would not threaten my friends or family and relationships. I went home that day with my study partner and boyfriend, and they were scared for me. Once I got home, I saw a little red package tied up with a little bow. And of course, this had to be from him. Classic maniac type move, sending packages. I opened the package, and inside were pictures of me and notes about how he was going to hurt people and how he loved my eyes, and so many other things about what he was going to do to me, things that made me physically sick that I actually threw up. I stayed home and called my brother, who was currently working as a police officer, and he advised me to press charges. I did later that month, and thankfully he was suspended. I got a restraining order against him, and for a moment, I finally had peace of mind.
Let's start off with some background information. I'm a 19-year-old male living in a semi-large city in Ontario. It was around 11 at night, and I had just got done working out at the gym. I went to the grocery store to pick up some food for the next couple of days. While at the grocery store, I decided to get $120 cash back, money that I owed my mom. And unknown to me, as I left the store, money that I came so close to losing. Instead of going straight home, I decided to go for a little drive. I just got my car not long ago, and the novelty of driving stick hadn't worn off yet. After about a half hour of driving around in the city, I decided it's time to head home. As I passed the gas station on the edge of town, but still close to my house, I decided now's a good time as any to pull in and fuel up. I pull in, and I notice that I'm the only one at this gas station. I'm in a very industrial business part of town, the edge, like I said, so there isn't much around. There's an empty lot without light beside the gas station, and I noticed an SUV sitting there. I would say about 100 to 200 meters away, but I don't think much of it. I get out and start pumping gas, and that's when I noticed a woman come around the corner and walk straight towards me. As soon as I noticed her, a shiver ran down my spine. I instinctively locked my car. She walked towards me quickly, staring at me pretty intensely the whole time. I got in a fight with my boyfriend, and he left me here. Can you give me a ride to my mom's house? She said casually in her raspy smoker voice. Another chill ran down my spine as she repeated the question, almost word for word, in that same raspy voice. I have to pump gas first, I said to her, keeping my eyes on her the whole time. She then walks around the passenger side door beside me and grabs onto the door handle. Can you unlock your car door? "I'm cold, and I've been here for a while. I have to pay for gas," I said, deciding to cut the gas pumping short. I walk inside and talk to the guy behind the counter. I told him that the girl outside was kind of suspicious, and I didn't know her. He just kind of shrugged, and I could tell he wasn't interested in getting involved, so I walked out. I figured she was probably high or something, but I would have to find a way to just get her to leave me alone. As I walk out, the SUV that I mentioned earlier started up. I watched the driver maneuver himself so he could just drive out the exit. He then stopped, engine still running. He was still about 100 meters away. "Can you open the door now? I'm really cold." So many alarm bells were going off in my head already. First, she just looked sort of sketchy. She was dressed well enough, but her face was pretty rough. She was pretty much covered in makeup, but it didn't hide a nasty-looking sore on her lip. Her sunken eyes were dull and bloodshot, and just dead-looking. Second, she didn't seem like a damsel in distress. She didn't seem upset, and she spoke without much emotion. "No, that's not my problem. I need to go home," I said to her, as firmly as I could. "Come on, you're driving me home, right?" "I can't. I have to get home now." Reaching for my phone, I realize I left it in the car. "I'm cold. I've been out here for hours," she shouts, pretty angrily for someone who's asking for a favor. Then I notice her glance at the SUV. I begin to speculate what's going on, and raised my voice a bit. "That's not my problem." I'm now standing at the driver's side door. "I'm freezing. You said you would drive me home." "That's not my problem." I started to raise my voice, and she started to raise hers. We weren't yelling, but it was getting heated. We went back and forth like that for a couple of minutes. My mind was racing. I thought about losing my car, about getting stabbed or shot, about getting robbed for the $120 I had in my wallet. Then I just lost it on her. "Get the fuck back. You don't know who I am. Get the fuck back right now." I guess I was in fight mode at this point. I was pretty ready just to fucking clock this bitch if she tried anything, as awful as that may sound. I think I caught her off guard or something, because she stepped back right away. "You better get out of here right now then," she said, walking backwards. I instantly felt my balls tingle sadly and climb back up inside me after she said that. I was now out of fight mode and into fucking flight mode. I watched her until she got a decent distance away, noticing she was walking sort of towards the SUV. I didn't watch for much longer. I hopped in my car and peeled the fuck out of there. I turned into a random subdivision, making sure I wasn't being followed. I called the cops and they said they would send a car, but there wasn't much they could do because there was no real crime committed. But I did the right thing, and she was most likely bait for some kind of robbery. I then drove home as fast as I could. Sorry if this was a bit wordy. I'm still obsessed with the details of what happened, and that's what's got me so disturbed. The emotionless way she spoke, the creepy way she looked, that SUV. I'm surprised I didn't just burst into fucking tears. I mean, I've been jumped before, but this just seemed so crazy and predatory. The last thing she said to me absolutely haunts me. "You better get out of here right now then." Laying it all out like that, so suddenly giving up the damsel in distress act, has to be the worst part of this, for me.
I'm 22 now, but this happened when I was 16. At the time, I lived in Staten Island, New York. For a little background, I'm a female, and at the time, I was 120 pounds soaking wet with a height of 5'6". I thought I was invincible. I never imagined anything like this would ever happen to me. It was March 17th of 2013, around 10:30 p.m., and I was leaving my boyfriend's house. He walked me to the local bus stop as he always did. We joked and laughed while we waited for my bus to show up. Because it was kind of late, there weren't many cars on the street. I happened to notice a black SUV parked across the road. I didn't think much of it at the time. My bus eventually came, and I said goodbye to my boyfriend and boarded it. I took a seat next to the bus driver. The rest of the bus was empty. The driver turned to me once we hit the first red light, and he asked me, "What are you doing out this late?" It was random and a little creepy. I replied with, "I was just with my boyfriend." We made small talk, and my initial apprehension was put at ease. The driver then told me that it wasn't exactly safe to be out and about at this hour, and that I should be more careful. I nodded, but as I said before, I was an arrogant 16-year-old who thought she was invincible. As my stop approached, I looked at my phone and the time read 11:30 p.m., and my phone's battery was down to 5%. Great, I thought to myself. As I exited the bus and said my goodbyes to the driver, he told me to stay safe. I gave him another nod as the door folded back shut. For some reason, I just stood there and watched the bus make its way down the street until the taillights were well out of sight. As I stood there at the empty bus stop, a sensation of what I can only describe as impending doom came over me. The bus that dropped me off near my house was scheduled to arrive at 11:40, only 10 minutes. Staring off into space, thinking about some things I had to do when I got home. A black SUV pulls up to the bus stop. The uneasy feeling I had earlier intensified, but I did my best to play it cool. The man rolls down the window and asks me, "Hey, excuse me, do you know what time the bus is supposed to be here?" He appeared to be a mix between Spanish and Asian, medium build. At this point, I did not make the connection that this may have been the same vehicle I just saw before I boarded the first bus. I figured that he was probably waiting for someone, so I replied, "It shouldn't be long." He then asked me how long I've been waiting. It was then I started to freak out. This guy was giving me the creeps, but I considered that I might be overreacting just a tad. Perhaps he was just trying to pass the time, but still, I kept my guard up. I answered that I hadn't been waiting long. He then proceeded to try and make more small talk. I was trying to be polite, but I also kept looking at my pitch black phone screen, trying to subtly hint to him that I wasn't interested in the conversation. It was dark out at this point. The only luminescence was coming from some distant streetlights. However, there were also two big trees outside the bus stop that were positioned in such a way that they blocked out most of the light. So, if this guy tried anything, the dark would have provided decent cover. I nervously clenched my phone, the uncomfortable feeling inside increasing with every passing second. He then told me that he was new to the area and didn't know his way around too well. He claimed that he was in the army and was stationed nearby. He then asked where the beach was. "It's just down the street," I told him in a very matter-of-fact way, as if to convey, maybe you should go there so I don't have to look at you anymore. It was then that our eyes had met. I could see his face very clearly. His eyes were not like any normal human beings. It was as if they were looking right through me, staring at me like a hungry fox who had just discovered a trapped, defenseless rabbit. Then he asked me, "Do you mind if you show me around? Come on, get in the car, show me around the area." I may have been a naive 16-year-old, but I'm not an idiot. I knew if I got in that car, that would be the last time anyone heard from me. I was trying my best to show him that I wasn't afraid, so I politely declined while looking down the street from my boss. He then began to beg and plead. It was really kind of pathetic. I told him no once again. Then he said something that I'll never forget. "Come on, baby. It won't take long. I promise." My blood ran cold, and my stomach felt like it was going to drop right out of my ass. I felt absolutely sick, like I was going to throw up. But I kept my cool, and thankfully my bus was now in sight, coming down the street, and a feeling of relief washing over me. I told him no, once again, thinking that was the end of it. He then told me he'd drive me home right afterwards. This guy would not give up. I had finally had enough. With all the strength and courage in me, I shouted, "No! Leave me the hell alone, you fucking loser!" As my bus pulled up, I heard him say something genuinely terrifying, and I quote, "Fine, bitch. I'll just follow you and see where you live." My heart started to race. My hands broke out in a cold sweat, and my body began to tremble with fear. I quickly got on the bus, and honestly, I don't know why I didn't tell the bus driver what was going on. I think I was just in a state of shock. I was hoping that Mr. Jailbait Hunter in the SUV didn't mean what he said and that he was just pissed off and trying to scare me. When I sat down, I looked out the window. I saw headlights of the SUV tailing the bus. I thought I was going to have a mental breakdown. When the bus arrived at my stop, I ran like hell. I reached the front door to my house. It was usually unlocked, but tonight of all nights, it was locked from top to bottom. I frantically rang the doorbell while going through my bag to find my keys. Then, I heard someone pull up out front. Without turning around, I knew who it was. Just like in the movies, I dropped the keys as I was trying to put them in the front door. But somehow, I finally managed to unlock the door. Before turning the handle, I heard a car door slam shut from behind me. I quickly ran inside and locked the door. In a panic, I explained to my mother and my older brother what had happened. My brother ran outside and looked up and down the street. I was shaking, absolutely consumed by terror. My emotions finally got the best of me, and I could no longer hold back my tears. We called the police, and they came and searched the area. They asked me if I had gotten a tag number, and unfortunately, I had to tell the officer that it was too dark to see. But I did notice a sticker of some sort of a bird on the backseat driver's side window. It didn't dawn on me until they left that this had been the same SUV that was across the street when I was with my boyfriend an hour prior. They told me they checked the army base nearby and around the area, but no one had seen any vehicle matching the description I gave. All I could think about was what the bus driver had said to me, and the irony of what took place that same night. Years went by, and I didn't think much about this incident after that night. One day, I was scrolling through Facebook and see a picture that my friend had posted. It was a story of a man who had been following her home from work for the past 3 days. It was the same guy who I encountered 5 years prior. My heart felt like it was going to leap out of my throat. Looking at the post, I noticed that several other women had come forward, and they all shared similar experiences to mine. I ended up finding out that he almost kidnapped a 13-year-old girl. She allowed herself to be lured into his car, but once inside, she noticed a roll of duct tape, some rope, a pair of gloves, and a bottle of what turned out to be chloroform on the floorboard. She ended up jumping out of the window while they were stopped at a red light. I don't know all the details, but apparently, he got physical with another woman, who was pregnant, trying to force her into his car. He got ballsy and started trying to abduct these women in broad daylight. The news found out that his name was Leo, and also discovered that he had a wife and 2 daughters, who were around 3 and 5. They interviewed his neighbors. To my surprise, they defended him, saying that all these women were lying. It's truly unbelievable just how stupid some people are. 5 separate accounts from 5 different women, who have no connection with each other, have come forward and shared their experiences. Could you please dislodge your head from your ass and face up to the facts? Anyway, to this day, I have no idea what became of him, but the last thing I heard, he was still at large. I hope they caught him, so no other young woman have to be subjected to this monster ever again.